William Morrow and Harper Audio present Cruelty Free, a novel by Caroline Glenn, performed by Jamie Lamchick. To my family, who suggested I write a love story. This was the closest I got. You don't need my autograph. If you needed it, I'd give it to you. Bob Dylan, 1966. I know it's hard to see Britney Spears as a human being, but trust me, she is. She's a person. She's like you or I. And I don't know about you, but I know that I would be pretty shaken up right now. All you people care about is readers and making money off of her. She's a human. Kara Cunningham, leave Britney alone. Prologue. 10 years ago, a senseless, horrific crime shocked the country. At the center of it was one of the most famous young actresses on the planet, Lila Devlin. In a world so desensitized to violence and tragedy, the staggering response harkened back to the crime of the century scandals of the 1920s and 30s, back when the country read the same newspaper and listened to the same radio reports. Here was a respected actress at the peak of her career who made a single colossal mistake and triggered an irreparable sequence of events that rippled across social media, the press, and Los Angeles' elite. It was like watching a house of cards collapse in real time. The tragedy of Lila Devlin has remained in the public consciousness for as long as it has, not because she was a world-famous celebrity, not because of the salaciousness of the murder and the ensuing media circus, not even because she was a beautiful white woman. Her story flickers around us like a specter still, because she was the encapsulation of an American dream come true. In this era of late capitalism, you don't get many of those anymore. She came from nothing and rose to the stratosphere on her own merit, without any help. But, like every dream, eventually you wake up. Part 1. The Fall. Excerpts taken from The Devlin Baby, An Oral History, to be published by Sutton Books, spring 2024. A decade after that fateful day in March 2014, many pieces to the Devlin Baby puzzle are still missing. The following oral history has been compiled and edited over the last 10 years from primary and secondary sources to piece together a background and timeline of the most infamous kidnapping of the 21st century. Though the aim was total comprehension, Lila Devlin and Aidan Reynolds declined to participate. 1. As she stepped onto the plane bound for Los Angeles, Lila Devlin was overcome with an acute sense of doom. It stopped her short in the walkway as it ripped the air from her lungs, burrowing through skin and bone until it settled deep within her chest. A piercing wrongness that howled for her to turn around and go home. Lila had never liked to fly. She'd been 22 when she first set foot on a plane bound for Sundance, so nervous she'd vomited into her backpack the second the plane began to taxi on the runway. Susan Friedland had reached into her bag of special pills for something to calm her down, but it had never gotten easier. Lila hated the stale smell of the cabin that clung to her clothes, the seats so close together she'd bump her neighbor with too deep an inhale. Blithely placing her life in a stranger's hands and crossing her fingers, she'd return to the ground. It was just nerves, she told herself as she found her seat in coach. She used to trust those prickly feelings, her intuition warning her of what her conscious mind couldn't yet understand. But that intuition had become uncalibrated long ago and could no longer be trusted. She did a cursory check of the people around her, as she always did in public spaces. A tall man sat in the aisle seat across from her, legs stretched out in the little room he could find. A middle-aged woman adjusted the TV on the seat back in front of her, her teenage daughter beside her tapping mindlessly on her phone. No one gave her a second glance. The days she'd been incapable of going to the grocery store without being swarmed seemed like a distant dream. That girl didn't exist anymore. She had been replaced by younger, prettier girls who would eventually be replaced when they were no longer young and pretty. Not to mention her hair. It had once been a radiant copper color. Some red carpet host had dubbed it her signature feature. So Lila had chopped it to her shoulders and dyed it a limp, dirty blonde. She preferred to be invisible. The world had expanded when she'd discovered wealth and celebrity before a cage shut around her. Now it was open again. She slept for the first few hours of the flight. She did not remember her dreams. When she woke, a familiar panic flashed as they rattled in her mind, but she had trained herself to forget them over the years, wash them away before they could make a dent. A sharp ringing sound pierced the air, and Lila's body turned rigid. That was what she hated most about flying. A baby screamed at the top of its lungs. Its ears had popped with the altitude change, and it was afraid. Lila shifted in her seat, looking for the earplugs she had tucked into her purse for this express purpose. Lila could hear the frenzied shh of its mother, but the baby kept crying, starting and stopping in mouthy gasps of air. On the ground, she would have left the room, but here there was nowhere to go. Even earplugs couldn't mask it. It wasn't a sound you were supposed to block out. Then how the hell had I slept through— Stop! Had she said that out loud? Sometimes her mind raced so quickly that she chastised herself aloud, like her thoughts were sentient beings she had to scold into submission. She glanced over at her seat partner to see if he'd noticed, but he didn't look up from his book. Lila unbuckled her seatbelt and scooted past him to lock herself in the bathroom. It smelled like shit, and there was barely room to stand, but she would have gladly spent the remaining hours of the flight inside if given the option. She stared at herself in the mirror under the fluorescent LED lighting, watching her chest rise and fall as she practiced slow breathing. I find peace in my life. In my life, I make peace, Lila told herself. It was shocking how much of the healing process relied on picking a mantra and repeating it until it became a truth. She'd been comfortable in her little house on the other side of the world. It was simple, quiet. No one paid her attention, just another woman being swiftly outrun by middle age. Lila found she enjoyed being unremarkable. She'd planned to spend the rest of her life in anonymity. But after 10 years, Lila awoke one night to 3 names rattling around in her mind. Nico DeLuca, John Carmichael, and Nick Fox. She could see the specters of the 3 men hulking over her bedside. She'd screamed, yanked the blanket over her head like a child. They were gone when she'd woken in the morning, but she could feel their presences lingering around her. Fox sneering over her shoulder when she went to make her coffee. Nico cackling when she attempted to meditate. Lila knew deep in her soul there was only one way to make them go away for good. For as long as she blamed, resented, and despised these men for their roles in her daughter's death, any healing she claimed to do was a joke. The only way Lila could ever truly move on was through forgiveness. The idea felt revolting, beyond impossible, an affront to the memory of Josie entirely. But the more Lila considered it, the more it made sense. Josie was gone, and Lila had to keep living. She knew Josie wouldn't want her to waste her life away. Lila returned to her seat as the seatbelt sign blinked on. She was settling in when she noticed the man beside her staring. He was tall and handsome, in his early 20s, with wavy golden hair and bright blue eyes. There might as well have been a blinking neon sign across his cheekbones that said, "Aspiring actor." He smiled at her politely and then looked at her again, brow furrowing. For a panicked half-second, Lila thought he recognized her and that she would have to go through the little dance she did during those rare circumstances. "Oh, that's so funny. No, I get that a lot." "Did you buy those earplugs from the flight attendant?" he asked. Her chest deflated, and Lila returned his smile. "I brought them with me." The young man buckled his seatbelt and opened his dog-eared copy of Play It As It Lays. "Ah, bummer. You're really smart to bring them." He returned to his book, and Lila leaned back in her seat. The baby was still crying, but it was less frantic now, little whimpers of protest as its mother lulled it back to sleep. For the first year after Josie died, just seeing a child on the street sent her into a spiral. Babies in strollers, teenage girls in school uniforms. Everywhere she went, she found millions of clones that looked nothing like her. Lila had considered suicide, but it would have rendered Josie's death even more miserable and pointless than it was already. The plane jostled and the baby wailed. The man beside her noticed Lila's white knuckles as she gripped the armrest. Not a big flyer? No. I learned this thing from my drama teacher in high school that helps me when I'm anxious. Start with finding 4 things you can see and 3 things you can touch, he said. Lila searched his face for any sign of an agenda, but he appeared guileless. It really grounds you, he added. I mean, we're on a plane, but still. The plane shook again, and Lila supposed she had nothing better to do. The glowing seatbelt sign, the ice in her cup shaking, a man snoring open-mouthed, a woman marathoning The Real Housewives. Then she focused on what she was feeling. The cheap fabric of her seat, the roughness of her blue jeans, the frigid air conditioning coming out of the vent. Her attention had left the turbulence and the baby entirely. It works, right? The guy said enthusiastically. Thanks, Lila replied, putting her earplugs back in. The guy inhaled. Wait. Lila recognized his tone. I mean, I'm sorry I don't normally do stuff like this, but are you Lila Devlin? He asked, eyes bright and hopeful. What a story he'd be able to tell when he touched down. Lila smiled tightly, preparing to drop her usual line, but he continued before she could say anything. I'm an actor. I just graduated from drama school. My professor showed us your monologue from Too Many Mornings, and we studied it as one of the best performances by a young actor, like, ever. You're a huge inspiration to me. Lila hadn't expected that. She glanced across the aisle to see if anyone had heard, but no one was paying attention. That's very kind, thank you. He beamed at her. She waited for his eyes to turn downcast, or the inevitable apology, or the it's unimaginable, but instead he just stuck out his hand. I'm Peter. Lila stared at it. Was he playing a game? She realized she had hesitated too long and shook it tentatively. Peter continued, I haven't seen you in much lately. Did you take a break from film? Lila was almost speechless. He was 22. He had been a kid when it happened. Had he never heard? At the time, it had seemed inescapable. It was bizarre to think an entire generation of people didn't know. Yeah, I retired, Lila said, because she didn't know what else to say. Peter nodded. That sucks. You were really good. My professor said your performance was so natural he'd never want to train you formally, because that would ruin it. Lila tried to remember herself on that set, performing in front of a camera for the first time, hanging out with the crew members in Maine lobster shacks after shooting. But it was like imagining a different person entirely. Lila changed the subject. So you're moving to Los Angeles? Yep, Peter said. We have a spring showcase for agents and managers we perform in, so hopefully I can get signed. I've only been to LA once. I don't know anyone out here, but I'm really excited. I feel like Swingers prepared me. Swingers prepared you? You know the movie? Oh, I didn't mean actual swingers. Got it. Are you going home? Peter asked. I'm moving back. From where? He didn't seem to be nosy, just curious. I've been living all over. Asia, Europe. No, you were going eat, pray, love mode, Peter said. Sure. There was a voice in her head all the time, always. It screamed at her that she had failed to save Josie, just like she'd failed to save her father, just like she'd failed to save her marriage. 10 years ago, when the voice reached a fever pitch, she had driven to LAX and bought a ticket to the farthest place she saw on the departures board. She wound up in India and discovered meditation. It didn't eliminate the voice, but it turned the volume down. On the good days, she could mute it entirely. As a teenager, she would have mocked herself as a privileged cliché, but she was so desperate for relief she could no longer afford to care. What do you do now? Peter asked. Since you left acting, I mean. A couple of years after Josie died and the world had forgotten her, a small rose-colored part of Lila thought she could return to her childhood dream of becoming a veterinarian. She enrolled in school and, to her surprise, the classes made her happy. For a while, Josie lived in a corner of her mind, distant enough to allow her to function, but close enough to hold on to her memory. But as Lila grew more immersed in her studies, she found herself pushing Josie even further away. Some days she wouldn't think about her daughter at all. She couldn't do that. She would never allow herself to carry on as if nothing had happened. So she dropped out, and Josie's corner of her mind remained. "I'm starting a skincare business out here," Lila said, expecting him to lose interest. He didn't. "Oh, sick. My ex-girlfriend took me to get a facial for the first time last year."
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.